Hey, Stephanie, how are
Good, how
you?
are you?
I'm good. It's Sunday, and we're getting to talk about some really interesting things today.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
How's it out there in you're in Utah or Montana?
Colorado.
I forget. I'm sorry?
I'm in Colorado.
Oh, you're in Colorado. Okay, at least I got the area right. But but yeah, I mean it's so great that we've connected. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say. And I mean let's start with you telling us what inspired you to create this program, Journey Mapping.
Yeah, so I actually, back in 2014, my life was in a really amazing place. I felt like I was really beginning to understand who I was and who I was here to be. And I had built my business up in a way that was just thriving. I had an incredible team. I was making great money. I was doing what I loved. And the only thing that wasn't really working in my life was my relationship at the time. And so I
Okay.
ended a 2 year relationship, and he ended up committing suicide shortly after, which
Oh,
absolutely flattened me in my life and caused me to have PTSD, which led me into an abusive relationship. And I had tons of health issues and financial issues. And I couldn't use my brain anymore. The PTSD was so bad. So I went through this really challenging chapter in my own life and discovered The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, which I know we'll talk about. And
mhm.
that really prompted some of my own healing. And I had been doing a lot of different healing work throughout this entire experience, but The Hero's
Okay.
Journey really put a frame to what I was going through and where I was at inside of it. And so I was able to kind of create a map for myself of where I was at and where I wanted to go. And that was so powerful for me that as I came out of this season of my life and was able to rebuild everything and step into the next version of myself, I wanted to create my own program, which brought in some of the hero's journey as well as all the other things that I learned along the way.
Okay. Okay, great. First of all, sorry you had to go through that. That sounds incredibly painful.
Thank you.
How long did it take you, this whole process of healing and coming to the point where had the you got the idea of creating this system or this way of that helped you find your way back?
Yeah, it was about 3 years. So my loss happened at the end of 2014. And then in the
Yeah.
6 months after the loss, my PTSD just got really, really bad and everything started falling apart. And then I was in that
Mhm.
toxic, abusive relationship that, thanks to the PTSD, I didn't realize I was in until later. But I was in that for about a year and a half. And then it was another year of dealing with the health issues, like the fallout from both the loss and the trauma and the abuse. So it was about a few years before it really dropped in for me that not only was journey mapping something I wanted to create, but that I wanted to actually help people in this way. I had always been focused on helping people find their passion and build a life and business around it. And not that my work is much different now, it's just got a deeper layer, but I realized I really want to help people with healing. There's not enough conversation about how truly challenging this healing and growth work can be and how hard it is to reorient to ourselves and our lives and our work. And so it's definitely become part of my purpose and my passion, but it was about 3 years.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Like people feel like it's a lot easier than it is, because when you're dealing with emotions, it's you have to be willing to lift the hood and take a look at all the things that you may not want to see, you know? In your case, it was the PTSD. And um, did you get any counseling to deal with that, or was it something that you kind of excavated on your own?
I tried going to a grief counselor right after my loss, but that didn't feel right for me. And I ended up, when the PTSD really hit and my brain stopped working, like in the middle of summer, I couldn't remember who any of my clients were. I couldn't build websites, which is something that I did and had done for a long time. And I was actually in a networking group at the time, and we had someone in the group that did life and business coaching and some kind of healing and process work. And I felt very drawn to reach out and ask him and explain what was
Mm-hmm.
going on for me. And so I was introduced to a type of process work called The Journey, and it's created by Brandon Bays. And he actually gave me my first process. It's probably just under 2 hours. And process work, for those of you that don't know, is it's this particular type is kind of like a guided visualization, and it requires a lot of improv. So he really helped me kind of drop down through the layers of my emotion and get to like the deepest part of myself, and then really do some emptying out and processing of everything that I was feeling, everything that I had never said. You know, I had really hard conversations with my ex who had passed away inside of this process, and it was very intense and challenging and emotional, but it gave me most of my brain back overnight. And so I worked quite frequently with him. I later on, after the abusive relationship, did find a therapist that I really loved, and honestly, I did like a full court press for healing my trauma, healing the health issues, healing from the abuse, because it was just like, I will do anything to get my life back and to have my energy back and to feel like myself and step into what was next. So I did quite a lot of things.
That's great. That's great. And I'm so glad you got out of it. I mean, I think that people need to realize that they have to choose what works for them. Like I realize that there's no cookie cutter way of healing. Like you don't know how long it's going to take and what tools are going to work for you. Like you said that the grief counselor didn't work for you, that you found someone else to take you through that process.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing is to reach out and get help. Like anyone who's going through trauma or any kind of painful transition in their life, just reach out, get the support. I actually get a lot of emails from my blog readers who write about their problems. And I mean, the thing is, I can't write back to all of them and be like, look, this is what you got to do. All I can say is get help.
Yep.
Get help. Like you're hurting, you know? So, and I hate to be so brief, and I was worried, does that show that I'm insensitive? But I can't reply to everybody, so it's just so
Right.
I think
And you don't have the one answer for everybody because there isn't one.
yeah, there isn't usually. I mean, I can answer, but and I can give them a ton of resources, but all I can say is get help. It's amazing how many people out there are have these feelings that they don't address, and they kind of fester, and God knows what happens. So how that plays out and how that would manifest in their lives. So I think it's really important to, as a culture, we really need to start getting comfortable with getting in touch with our feelings
Yes.
and processing them in a
Yeah.
way that feels right to us.
And talking about these hard things, that's something I'm really passionate about now and have done in a lot of different ways, including my podcast.
So let's pick up from where we left off. I believe you were telling me. What were you telling me about? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I think I was talking about how important it is to share our journeys and these stories. And so I've done that in a lot of different ways. I found different ways to talk about my experience, and then started my podcast, which I'm excited that you're going to be joining on as well, because so many people have lived through such different and incredible and almost unbelievable experiences, challenging chapters and big life transitions of all kinds. And it's just so important for us to normalize the conversation around grief and trauma and abuse and managing our emotions and finding the right support. And so, yeah, I just think it's important that we have these conversations.
Right. And I mean, and that's part of life, really, and I think we need to start accepting that as something normal, because I see life as being kind of cyclical. You have those dark periods, and you have those periods where things seem to be going great. So I think we need to have the tools to set us up so that we are ready for those dark times, because
Yeah.
they're going to come. Loss is inevitable. So, and is that something that is incorporated into journey mapping?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
So one of the foundational, there's 5 phases to journey mapping, and the first
yeah,
one is really preparing for the journey, and that's where we really like get the foundational pieces in place, one of which is learning how to name and feel and process and deal with your emotions, like in all forms. If we can't feel our feelings, then we can't do the deeper work, because we're always going to be trying to avoid or bypass or stuff. And then also things like, building trust and faith in yourself and whatever higher power is the one that resonates for you. So for some people, that's God. For some, it's spirit, source, energy. And others, it's just intuition and being able to trust ourselves. And so it's before you can do the deeper healing work, you have to have this really deep relationship and connection to yourself and who you are. And you have to be able to trust yourself because, like we just talked about, there's so many different healing modalities out there, and there's just like billions of experts and people who are sharing and who think that they have
And
the right
people who are not
answer.
really experts.
Right. And they can't possibly, no one can be the expert in your own life but you. And so
Yeah.
giving people the tools to be able to discern, well, oh, I hear Stephenie talking about this thing called journey mapping. That sounds amazing for me. Or, you know what? That's not the thing that I need. I'm going to go look over here, and just giving people the tools to be able to navigate this journey for them.
Yeah. And I also think it's about finding the right people, the right support system, because
Absolutely.
yeah, you can't do it on your own.
No, nobody does it alone.
Yeah, you can't. You can't. You need that. You need at least one person to, to walk you through those turbulent times. Um, yeah. So, are there more stages? You were
Yeah,
talking about the
there's
stage.
5 of them. So the first one, like I said, is preparing for the journey, and it's just laying the
Yeah.
foundation for everything else. And the second stage is looking at the ordinary world. So it pulls a little bit of language from Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, but is not
Yeah.
identical to it. And in that second stage, we really kind of look at where you're coming from, and it gives us this
Mhm.
point of reference. Because if you don't know where the journey began, it's hard for you to say, okay, here's where I am inside of it, and here's where I need to go next. And so we kind of do this inventory and audit process of where you're coming from. And we don't do it from a place of wishing we could go back and clinging to what was, because we can't go back when we're on these journeys.
Yeah.
We do it for a point of reference so that I can start to see, well, if I'm not there anymore, where might I be? And if I'm not that person anymore, who might I be becoming? And so that's the second stage. And stage
Okay.
3 is navigating the special world, which is like the deep underbelly of the work. And that's where we really prepare for and move through death and rebirth in all forms, which is a big element of Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey and just a huge part of this work. In order to step into what's next, we often have to let what was die off. And that's a really hard and scary and
It's not.
challenging process.
It's not easy, especially if you're attached, really attached to the past
Yeah.
or whatever was in the past,
Yeah. And it's scary to
person.
go into this new unknown. And
It is scary.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's like the really deep work. And there's a lot of process work in there that we do. And it works with this concept of the void that I'm really passionate about, which is essentially like the
Hmm.
gateway to everything that we want. And that's where really working with our emotions comes into play. We want to drop through all of our emotions and hit this kind of unknown zone, this void, this pocket that we're afraid of, and we want to go further than we've ever gone before in some of this deeper healing and feeling work. And that's what allows us to really kind of go through the death and rebirth and start stepping into what's next. And then stage 4 is choosing
Oh,
the path.
sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you. Is there any specific tools that you use to help them do that, to
Yep.
deal with the emotions? Yeah.
Yeah, so process work, and I've developed my own processes since the first time I ever
Oh,
did
what you
it.
just talked about, you
Yeah.
learned from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's
I've never
very
heard of process work. Is it some? Yeah. What is it exactly?
there's a lot of different kinds of process work, but it's essentially what the name implies, which is we want to process out what's been stored. And so the type of process work that I do and that I experienced is really focused on cellular healing. And so anytime we don't express an emotion, it gets stored. Anytime we don't express ourselves either verbally or creatively, like we're not speaking our truth, that gets stored. Unresolved grief and trauma. So we think that if we ignore something, it goes away, but it just like embeds into our cells. And so that's when we start to get sick. And my
Yeah.
PTSD comes from a lot of things, which we're only really beginning to understand. Mine was from sudden bereavement. I had a suicide loss that I was not expecting that just turned my world
Hmm.
upside down. And so that gave me PTSD. But one of the key things that allowed me to get my brain back was to express when I didn't feel like I could express, which was allowing myself to be really angry that he died, which you're not supposed to
Oh,
say, when someone has committed suicide. And so allowing myself the
to
space to
verbalize that
verbalize
and
it, to feel it, to get it out of
mhm,
me. And so
yeah,
process work is just like, let's like get it out of you.
let it get it all out. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I did something similar when after I went through a really tough time in my life. I did a lot of journaling, and that really helped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Journaling is a
that's how
form of
I process
processing.
things.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And then so once we've emptied out and we've gone through that death and rebirth process, then we have to make the choice to really rise up and come back. And that was something that I learned from the hero's journey in the midst of all my grief and trauma, was that we don't hit rock bottom and just bounce back. Like we don't go around this hero's journey cycle and the momentum of it doesn't like kick us around, and it like we have to choose to rise up and come
mm,
back, and we have to choose to do the work. And in this choosing, we also have to start kind of reorienting to ourselves and our life and our work and relationships, because not only have we gone through something that put us on this path, but we've gone through death and rebirth. We've done this deeper healing work. And now we're in the middle of our life and everything around us might still be the same, but we've changed so much at our core that we have to start reorienting to like, who am I now? And who do I want to be inside these relationships? And does my work
yeah,
even resonate anymore?
yeah, because you've essentially shed an old layer of your identity, so you
Yep.
need to. Uh, yeah, that was certainly the case for me because I also went through a tough breakup, and I had to completely, and my identity was so tied to that
Yep.
person and all their friends, their social
Yep.
circle. That was my life, and so I literally had to start from scratch.
Yeah.
That took me some time.
Oh,
So
I'm
I was probably
sure.
stuck on this stage for a very long time
Yeah,
because I
this
had
is
to
a hard
really do
one.
some soul searching
Yeah.
and be like, okay, who was that person before all of this started? you
Yeah, and
know,
even who am I after? Because you've been through this
and who am I after?
relationship
Yeah,
and
because
you've
I
changed.
had to integrate everything that I learned, and boy, did I learn a lot of things. So, yeah, this stage took me a while.
Yeah. This is the hard one. I thought that like hitting rock bottom, that like everything horrible that happened to put me on this path, like I thought everything else was the hard part. The choosing to come back is the really, really hard part, because you have to make the choice every moment of every day. And you're still in the middle of your own life, but you've changed so much and you're trying to figure out what's next. Like you were sharing in your relationship, it's like everything is disorienting. It's the hard part.
I didn't want to get into it, but it was a very, very hard. It
Yep.
was hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're choosing, what is my path for return? What does returning even mean for me? And really starting to navigate that piece in stage 4, which again is really intense. And then stage 5 is stepping into what's next. And so that's really where we've done that deeper work of who am I now and what do I want to create? And now we're really utilizing a lot of tools about how to make the impossible happen, which is something I'm also really passionate about, and actively stepping into what's meant to come next. And this requires a whole different type of action. It's actually rooted in language and conversation versus just doing. And figuring out what is my purpose, who am I here to be, and how do I want to create meaning from what I've been through, because as humans we're meaning making machines, and it's very easy for
Oh,
us to make meaning that isn't helpful for us. And so what is the meaning that we want to make, and how do we want to be shaped?
love it. I love it. Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty comprehensive, and having a template like that will definitely um, it'll guide people and help them find their way. But here's the thing. This, the journey is rarely is it so linear and sequential.
Nope.
I mean, you can go to stage 3 and then go back to stage 2.
Yep.
You can take you can get stuck in one stage as I did. I took stage 4. I was there for like maybe 2 years. So, how can people have faith in the process if they get stuck, or if I don't know, if they're having a hard time
Yeah,
processing, for instance?
that's a
Like
great
what?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not linear. and we kind of bounce around. And also you can have journeys inside journeys inside journeys. So it can be very complex
Uh,
depending on what you're
mm,
going through. And what I always say, one of the things that I teach on and speak to in the program and in the work is this concept of the terror barrier. And essentially, we have a conscious and subconscious mind. And we think that we're making conscious choices, but really, if we don't understand the subconscious piece, then we're never really making actual conscious free will choices, because what's going on underneath is really driving everything. And so
yeah.
anytime
You know
we,
that iceberg, you've seen the diagram of the iceberg,
yeah,
right? It's just the tip of the iceberg is the conscious mind, and everything below is like this huge chunk, and that's
yep,
your
that is
unconscious
running
mind.
the show. Yep.
That is running the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so understanding the conscious and subconscious piece, but also understanding that anytime we try to create change, even if we're trying to change something that is awful and painful. So even me trying to leave an abusive relationship consciously, it's like, of course I want to leave this.
Yeah, yeah. On the rational
Subconsciously,
mind, it's like, yeah, of course.
right. Subconsciously, even if it's painful, our subconscious mind knows we can survive it. And so anytime that we start doing this work and we start trying to create change or heal or grow, even if consciously it's like, duh, yes, we want this, it's chaotic and it's messy and it's hard. And where people trip up is that it starts to get worse before it gets better. And like stuff hits the fan and everything feels chaotic and hard,
Stuff.
and it's
Yeah.
supposed to. And that's the reminder that I really hammer home for people is nothing's wrong. It feels like everything's falling apart and maybe you shouldn't be doing this, and you want to give up and all the things, but like nothing is actually wrong. This is actually what's supposed to happen. And if you can just weather that and move through it with support and self-care and all the things, you'll get to the other side, and then you'll be able to take the next big step forward and all the stuff will hit the fan again. And it's like nothing's wrong here. It's what it looks like to grow and heal. We just don't talk about that part enough.
Yeah. It can get really, really messy. Uh, with the subconscious thoughts, you know what really helped me? I did quite a bit of hypnotherapy.
Yeah, I've heard that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was actually a coach at a holistic center, and I was surrounded by people who were doing hypnotherapy, theta healing, past life regression, uh, all kinds of stuff, right? Every holistic practice you can think of. So I had that at my disposal. So I kind of tried each one. And this was while I was going through my breakup, and that really helped me, like,
Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend who does hypnosis. Like he's a provider of it, and it sounds
yeah.
very similar to process work in that it can require some improv. Like you drop in deep and it's like, well, what's the block here and what do we need to change and how do we need to do
Mhm.
that? So that's awesome that you did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think people, if you're struggling with kind of getting over a pattern, you definitely try something that would address your thought on a subconscious level. Again, it's not going to be a linear process. It's going to take time. It's going to get messy, as
Yeah.
Stephenie said. So, um, yeah. Um, okay. So, how were you able to integrate everything that you learned um, after all that you went through? Like, because at the end of the day, I once heard this Dr. Phil say this. I forget what it is. He says the tough experiences that you have and the pain that you go through, it's the tuition that you pay for the wisdom that you gain out of it.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. And what you gain out of these really tough times in your life is the wisdom, is the learning, because that's what's really gonna help you grow and evolve as a person. So, what were some of the things that you did to do that?
To integrate everything I learned like into my life.
Yeah.
Um, it's a great question. It was a very organic process, I would say. And the funny, I can laugh about it now, part of this was I had PTSD. And so I remember people telling me, well, this might just be how your brain works. They didn't want me to resist what was and be frustrated, but I couldn't accept that because I didn't have a brain anymore. And so I
You didn't have a brain anymore?
no, it wouldn't.
Okay.
I couldn't function. I would drive in circles around my house because in the time it took to
Oh,
lap the block, I would forget I was going home. I didn't know who my clients were. I didn't, like I said, it got to the point that I couldn't develop websites anymore, which I had done for years. So my brain was not working. And I made the choice that I would figure it out. I would heal my brain. I didn't care if people thought that that's just the way it was now. If it got rewired in an instant from the trauma, there must be a way to wire it back. And so in those early days, I read a lot of books on PTSD and trauma, but I couldn't remember what I read. So I'd have to like highlight and go back and read it again. And like it took a lot of intention and a lot of repetition. And that the interesting thing about it is that I did that for a lot of things. So I took a lot of notes. I read a lot of books. You know, I talked to a lot of really brilliant, smart people, both friends and
mhm.
service providers. And
Yeah.
my brain was recording the whole time. And now I have access to this wealth of knowledge that I jammed in there that I couldn't remember at the time. But it was a lot of like, I had to make a habit of things. I had to figure out how to make things habitual, and teach myself new skills and really hack. Like executive function is something that gets affected by trauma, which is just our ability to do things. And I had to learn where I couldn't do things the way that I did before anymore and like hack it and figure out, well, how do I do this now? And who can help me do this? And how do I remember? Like I, to this day, have a practice of, I never remember if I closed the door. That was one of my early PTSD. I just blanked out. I would lose moments. And so I had to make the practice that every time I locked the door, I looked at myself locking it. I said where I was going and I looked at what I was wearing and I would like drill that into my brain. So when I got to my car, 30 seconds later and I was like, oh my God, did I lock the door? I could look at my clothes and be like, here's where I'm going. And so I had to learn to hack. And that was true of integrating, you know, different skills and tools I was learning for processing my emotions and healing and things like that. And so it was a lot of intentional effort.
But what's interesting about your case is that you had the awareness and the will to get through it.
Yes.
Not a lot of people have that.
It's easy to give up. Yeah.
Yes, they give up, or they're just not even aware that they're going through this, or that there is a way out.
Yeah.
So in that case, what happens?
Yeah, we have to have a deep level of self-awareness, which I had done. I'm grateful for all the personal development work I had done before that because
Yeah.
it gave me that as a skill that I'm very self-aware. And part of that is hypervigilance from childhood trauma and being empathic and intuitive and all the things.
Oh, join the club.
And also being like, I know what I want. And so, you know, something else that I share about me that gives context for why I make decisions like, screw that, I'm going to go figure out how to fix my brain when other people wouldn't even notice that something was off, maybe, is I, as a teenager, was very depressed and suicidal and made the choice after my own failed suicide attempt that, like, I'm going to see this life through. And so for me, it could be very easy to just be like, whatever, and give up. But I'm also like, well, I'm here for the long haul. So I might as well, like, get back up and try again, no matter what knocks me down, which it doesn't look as inspiring as it sounds. Like we talked about, that is a lot of really hard, fussy choices that I had to make every moment of every day,
Yeah.
and a lot of struggle. I mean, like I said, I read books about PTSD and I couldn't remember anything I read the next sentence on. And so it is, I think, just part of who I am that, like, I'm here, I'm going to do this thing. So anytime I get knocked down, it's like, okay, well, what do I want? And what do I need to do to get back up?
Yeah. So resilience. I mean, that's what you need at the end of the day. I think resilience and courage are two
Courage is a big
really,
one.
really important qualities to develop. And if you're a parent or a teacher, please make it a point to somehow infuse those qualities or in kids, because that's going to help you go a long way in life, I think, at least.
Yeah, and courage is just taking action despite the fear. It's not some special quality. It's just scared to death, and
Yeah.
here I go anyways.
But you have naysayers, you have like what if scenarios, what if it doesn't happen, what if I mess up, what if
Yeah.
what if I'm rejected? This. Um, so it's like convincing yourself. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely think those two qualities can take you a long, long way.
Yeah.
Um, and let's talk about taking detours and changing our mind along the way.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
It's par for the course. I mean, that's the thing when we've been altered at our core and we're working towards something new or different, or even just trying to make sense of our life, is that it's a windy, confusing, challenging road, and we're figuring out who we're becoming, like who we are now and who we're becoming as we're navigating everything that we're going through. And so it takes, again, that deep level of self-awareness and discernment and trusting ourselves to say, well, I thought I was supposed to go this way, and old me would have chosen that, or maybe everyone around me thinks that I should, but now that I'm doing it, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like me. And it's par for the course, and you have to trust yourself and give yourself the grace to course correct as you go and to surrender to the unfolding. That's part of challenging chapters and big life transitions, is that everything is shifted, either because of what happened and our world has changed, and especially because we have changed. And so we have to kind of surrender to the unfolding and the unraveling for a while as things like settle and rebuild. And that takes just a tremendous amount of self-trust and
Yeah.
a
And
willingness.
releasing control,
Yeah.
like, just
Releasing our
surrender.
grip.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's par for the course, and just trust yourself in that. And that discernment is important because, again, everyone's going to have an opinion, especially the people closest to you, but they're not you and they're not in the situation, and they can't make that decision for you.
Yeah. I think it's really difficult when things come out of the left field and you weren't expecting certain things. Like for instance, your what happened with your relationship. I mean, obviously that's on a much higher magnitude from most people experience. But I mean, what happened with COVID? Like, we just had to somehow adapt
Yep.
and deal with our new reality. And again, I think that being adaptable and trying to figure out how to navigate that. I mean, there's no you'd need a new map, or you'd need like I don't know how you would call that, but you would need like a mini map to get out of that
Yep.
get out of that deviation that you would have to take. So
Yeah, and some detours are so necessary and fruitful. Like I never would have chosen this detour for myself, but it has shaped me in ways that I'm incredibly grateful for, and ways that still break
in
my heart.
retrospect,
Yeah, and
yeah,
it
in
has
retrospect, you
given
see that.
me, it has
Yeah,
given me so much more than I can now do in the world. So, yeah.
yeah. I mean, you see that in retrospect, but when you're going through it at the time, it's just like, oh my
Yeah.
God, what is happening? What do I do?
Yeah.
Like, and I think what really helped me is just having faith, just having faith and being proactive about, okay, what are my options? What are some of the things that I can do? And really staying connected to my values.
Yep.
You know, your values, like what's really important to you. Because when you know what your values are, that can really help you in your decision making.
Absolutely.
Like for instance, one of my values is freedom. It's one of my top values, and and the kind of life I'm living right now is dictated by this value, and I'm sacrificing other lower values. But it's a deliberate choice I've made because I know what's important to me and what's going to make me happy at the end of the day. So I think knowing those intrinsic qualities, those and knowing what your purpose is, what your goals are. These things are, we talk about it, but no one actually takes the time to figure out what is it important to them,
Right.
because I feel that's essentially the compass that we can use to navigate our life.
Yeah, values driven. It makes a huge difference. Freedom is one of my highest values, and truth is like a
Yeah.
close second. And that
Sorry,
is
what's a close second?
truth. So truth,
Truth. Oh, yeah.
transparency, honesty. And
Mm.
a lot of my decisions are rooted in like, does this align with my values, and will this allow me to feel that freedom that I need? And, is
Yeah.
honesty and truth like a part of this relationship or experience? So knowing them is really important.
Right. Right. Okay, and what do you think about dreams? Do you do any dream journaling or
I don't do dream journaling, but I believe dream processing is a huge part of healing. I personally process both my own traumas, but also like other people's experiences.
Mhm.
I have these periods where I'll dream, and that's always in like batches of 4 to 5, and it's people I know, whether or not they're like present in my life, and I'll dream about them. And I've gotten into the habit of reaching out and asking them, how's it going with this or whatever. And about 75% of the time, the dreams are accurate. But I have noticed after I do deeper healing work, after some of my clients do deeper process work, there is a tendency to process dream, which is where like more of the stuff comes up. And sometimes that's pleasant. A lot of the times it's like not the thing we want to dream about, but it's another way that our subconscious works through things.
Yeah. Yeah, for me dreams have been very valuable and sometimes they can be quite crazy. Like I don't know, I tend to dream a lot about natural phenomenons. Like I tsunamis, tornadoes. The other day I saw myself running on sand dunes. So, and it might seem ridiculous at first, but if you dig deep, you can really get a sense of, you know, how how your internal world is, what the state currently is, and
Yeah.
even give you some idea about where you are on your journey. Like, it's because of the symbolism of dreams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's about it. Is there anything else that you would like to share, Stephenie?
I always like to end these kinds of things with just a reminder of context and discernment. Like, really take whatever you've heard here and think about what's the context of your own experience, and then discern for yourself what resonates and what doesn't, and trust yourself in that. Like we talked about, there's so many different paths and modalities and tools. Like, just trust yourself.
Trust yourself, guys. Trust yourself. All right. Stephenie, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, thank you. You can find me you can come to my profile, Stephenie Z or stepheniezamora.com, and I just spell my name Stephenie Zamora. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and you have a program called Journey
Yes,
Mapping. So,
yep.
yes. Talk about that a little bit for those who are
Yeah,
interested in getting to
so
the process.
stepheniezamora.com is my hub. It'll shoot you off in a lot of different directions. So if you go there, you can head over to callofthevoid.tv, and that's where all of my content for healing and rising up and coming back lives, as well as journey mapping, which is a 12-week program. We're actually about to do a live run starting in June. So hop on the list over there if you want to learn more about it. But yeah, there's tons of free resources as well.
Perfect. Okay, Stephanie, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you have a great Sunday.
You too.
Okay, bye. And
Bye.
bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.